If you live in an older building, you eventually learn to ignore the night noises, the sudden clicks of the thermostat, the pipes expanding, the slow shifting of wood framing. You rationalize the sounds as just the house settling, and you go back to sleep. But the context of those noises matters. Take a small, cheap rental property out in Flagstaff, Arizona. It is a single-story structure pushed right up against a thick pine forest, a solid 15-minute drive from the nearest gas station. After dark, the traffic drops to zero. Out there, you rely on your own security systems. For the tenant renting this house, that system was his dog, a German Shepherd mix named Ranger. Like most watchdogs, Ranger had a clear baseline behavior. He barked at external threats, coyotes, passing headlights, a squirrel out in the yard. Then came a Tuesday morning, exactly at 2:14 a.m. Ranger broke his established pattern. He didn't look at the window, and he didn't bark. He stood up, pinned his ears back, and aimed a low, silent growl directly at a solid interior bedroom wall. 10 seconds later, a physical knock answered the dog. 3 slow taps echoing through the drywall, right beside the tenant's bed. The sound originated completely from inside the wall cavity itself. This diagram shows the wireframe of a standard single-story home, and we're going to use it to look at a concept known as spatial infiltration. The areas highlighted in orange represent a property's blind spots: the dirt crawl spaces, the hollow cavities between rooms, the HVAC vents. These are the negative spaces built for plumbing and insulation, but they form an entirely separate, interconnected layout hidden right behind the plaster. Normally, home security focuses entirely on the perimeter, locking doors and closing windows to keep a predator outside. When an intruder bypasses that perimeter to occupy the architecture itself, all those deadbolts are now locking you inside with them. By daylight, the tenant checked the only logical access point. Around the back of the house, underneath the porch, there was an exterior entrance to the foundation. The heavy metal hatch had been left slightly open. Pulling it fully upward released a trapped wave of air. It smelled heavily of wet dirt, rotting food, and human body odor. Shining a flashlight into the darkness under the house revealed a clutter of pipes and pink insulation. Pushed all the way into the furthest corner, completely hidden from the entrance, lay a sleeping bag. The landlord later admitted that the previous renter broke his lease after only 2 months. That tenant had complained about identical knocking sounds late at night and eventually swore he could hear someone whispering his name up through the floor vents. When that previous tenant moved out, the local police searched the crawlspace and found empty bottles and food wrappers. Because the space was empty at that exact moment, they concluded the squatter had simply moved on. By assuming the space was empty, the authorities left the physical vulnerability open for the next tenant. The intruder had not moved on. They had simply been away from the camp when the police arrived. On the tenant's final night in the house, the sounds returned. Sometime before 2 a.m., the dog led him out into the pitch-black hallway. Right beneath their feet, slow, heavy crawling sounds dragged through the dirt below the kitchen floorboards. Then, 3 tight knocks hit the underside of the floor. From the nearby kitchen vent, the tenant heard slow, shaky breathing echoing up the metal ductwork. As he watched, one corner of the metal vent grate physically lifted upward. He backed out the front door, locked himself in his truck in the freezing air, and called the sheriff's department. Within an hour, deputies were pulling up the metal hatch to clear the property. What they found down there revealed a permanent, long-term habitation. There was a stocked living area positioned directly beneath the kitchen, containing blankets, fresh batteries, water bottles, and food that had been taken from the tenant's own refrigerator upstairs. This diagram shows the surveillance setup they uncovered. The occupant had carved dozens of tiny peepholes upward through the floorboards. The holes were small enough to stay hidden in the shadows of the room above, but wide enough at the bottom to allow a clear line of sight. The person below had been tracking the tenant's exact movements across the house every single night. Down in the dirt, positioned near the bedroom wall, deputies discovered something else: a small pile of dog treats. The intruder had been methodically feeding the German Shepherd through the floor gaps, training the animal to associate their scent and presence with a reward. There is a specific term for this behavior. It is called frogging. It describes a person secretly living alongside a resident inside their own dwelling, entirely undetected. Stealing snacks from the fridge is an act of basic survival. Drilling peepholes to watch someone sleep and conditioning their guard dog to accept a stranger shows a transition from a simple squatter to a predator actively observing a host. The tenant packed his belongings and drove away before the sun came up. At the time, he assumed he was escaping a stalker who was confined entirely to the dirt foundation under the house. 6 months later, the landlord sold the property. The new owners immediately brought in construction crews to rip up the old kitchen flooring and renovate the space. This diagram highlights the architectural anomaly the contractors discovered during that renovation. Someone manually removed floor joists to carve a vertical passageway connecting the crawl space directly into the interior walls. The intruder wasn't just tapping under the floor. They were standing upright inside the wall cavity, separated from the tenant's face by only a half-inch of drywall. After the police cleared the crawl space on that final night, they requested the security camera footage from the only gas station down the highway. They reviewed hours of tape. No one ever walked past, and no strange vehicles ever left the area. Because the deputies only searched the crawl space below the floorboards, they missed the vertical shaft entirely. The intruder likely never fled into the forest. They simply climbed up into the walls, pulled their feet up, and waited silently as the next family moved in.